Today I'm here to talk about building the multimodal world. So for those of you who have not met, my name is Emily, and I am the head of growth at Voiceflow. We are a tool that makes it easy for people to design, to develop, and launch conversation experiences across whatever platform and across whatever stage of the design flow. And before we get into all this, I really want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because no matter what type of conversation design that each one of us is focused on, there's a lot of universal truths and a lot of things that we're all working on together to really get to that next stage of what that standardization looks like. Because conversation design isn't just a new form of interface. It's challenging the way that we're designing, that we're developing, and most importantly, the way that we're interacting with technology. And while there's many assistants that have really popularized this on the consumer end, whether it's from Siri, Alexa, Google, Magenta, and so many more, there's so much work that is to be done on the custom assistant, on IoT, and the innovations even internally within companies and their own macro experiences. And conversation itself has also extended so far beyond whether it's chat and voice, and now also how they're intermixing. It's challenging the norms for companionship, communication, contextual design. So in all of these different interactions and all the different ways that we have built these conversations, the impact is definitely there. The hard part about it, however, is that we're not always building for today. And in a lot of cases, we're building in this world where we're trying to imagine what could our everyday experience now expand into. Whether it's us entering into the car and making sure that we're eliminating or creating better experiences dependent on where it is that we're sitting, what it is that we're doing at that time, to challenging what are the expectations from consumers when they re-enter the world post-COVID. Do they want to touch screens? Do they want to go press buttons? Do they want to do that experience if that is a one-to-one experience when there are many in a crowd? Or more importantly, is it about optimizing and also thinking about how can we create experiences that better open opportunity for us as people, as workers, to do better, to open up more jobs, and ideally accelerate the way that we can actually work, eliminating human error, trying to eliminate the remedial tasks that no one really wants to do, while trying to work with each other to create this new space. And the other part that can be difficult, especially when we as designers can be biased by our own opinions, is that we're not always building for ourselves. And one of the beautiful things about this interface and about this whole space is that it's opened up opportunities to hit generations that would have otherwise been left behind, or who would have otherwise been a little bit too early to quite get a little bit of the same experience that we have become so accustomed to with haptic feedback, with our phones, with our computers. And the best part about it, and I know many people on this stage have already spoken about this, is that it's also opened up a conversation that we haven't really been able to have around accessibility, where for the first time in many, many iterations of innovation, you have this democratization where anyone that suddenly has a voice, that is able to speak, that is within a radius, suddenly has the ability to control or interact or create something for the very first time. And that's really what brings us to Voice today, where we're seeing explosive growth amongst not only just the consumerized side of this, where smart speakers have definitely outpaced any new innovation over the last few decades, but also in the expectations from our consumer side. They're getting smarter, the adoption side's getting faster. The way that we are now thinking about trying to tap into that is becoming more and more of a race. And the consumer is meeting us there faster than ever. Where over the first few years, we've seen a lot of sensationalism, a lot of people getting excited about whether it's robots, AI, random things in Black Mirror. But the big thing that we've seen is that there's also just been a lot of change. Not just from the side of, here are some early platforms, here's some early things that people have actually started to think about, but instead also in the way that we've opened up and embraced more and more ways that people can interact with the things that are available. Whether it's being popularized, and for many folks, their intro or foray into it was the speaker itself. So naturally, we're gonna want to treat it like a speaker, let it play music, let it do the things that a Bluetooth speaker perhaps could also do. Moving into a screen and speaker, where we naturally have that habit of accepting or expecting some visual to come along with that. And now, as we move into multimodality or even ecosystem design, the consumer now expecting that seamless experience, the memory from one interaction point to another, to follow that, to eliminate that extra reprompt or that extra time that it may forget your name, et cetera. And this new functionality, design, context, capability are all what is driving this platform innovation forward. However, it's not just about choosing one platform for all, which is really what I think is exciting about multimodal design as a whole, is that it's really about intermixing the best combination of platforms and solutions to create this best experience, which is why I think it's so exciting to have events like this, where we have different platforms that are in the same room, different people who are solving different points of a consumer's life cycle, problem set, who ultimately all are talking to the same person, just at different times. And more importantly, when we think about this, it also even boils back down into the design itself, where it's not just about designing a one-size-fits-all approach to everything, or even just choosing the inputs that you expect by default. It's about figuring out what's the best design, what's the best NLU, NLP, and also the platform of which it will best complement your user. And so I always like to think about NLU, NLP as almost like you choose your friends. Where, for instance, in this example, Susie may have known me the longest, Jackson, super stylish, Jessica, very, very good with trivia, and Don is a literal doctor. In this case, you wouldn't call on any one of these people for the same thing over and over again. You would naturally filter out and choose which one already had that knowledge base to ideally maximize what could be your output, what would be the best way of you getting that. And when you think about NLU NLPs, it's the same way. You want to choose the one that's been trained in the domain that you are trying to create. And you want to make sure that your design can intermix and pull from the right NLU NLP at the right time to make that experience more memorable. Because each platform has that natural advantage, and each NLU NLP can enhance or upgrade parts of that experience. And this is something that we think about a lot as we continue to scale from a conversation design tooling perspective, where it's not really just about trying to lock in, it's really about optionality here. Because building today requires this contextual thinking and really thinking about not just what makes up the back end, but also when is the right time, what are they competing with? And it's not the same as you would expect when you know if you're targeting someone on their phone, they're looking at X amount of pixels, they're doing X amount of things, in the same way that you would expect that with their computer. With voice, they could be looking in the polar opposite direction, dealing with their kid that's crying and already late for a meeting, but they still need something from you. So how do you design for that? So really, when you think about things, it really boils down into even human examples. For instance, you want to break up with your quarantine fling. You could call, you could text, both could probably do the job. But there's always going to be one that's slightly better based on the emotion, the experience that you want to leave. So maybe you don't like them very much and you're going to text them. Maybe you want to make that a little bit easier and you're going to call them. And again, this is something that you want to think about when thinking about multimodal. Same way, you want to tell a story to a friend. Do you tell them directly? The options here is you can actually use emotion, or in some cases, SSML, still get in there. And on the other side as well, do you just type it? And this is the same type of process that you think about, even challenging and thinking back on the days back when you were in college. Do you talk the way that you write an essay? Probably not. And so there's going to be different things that come out from that. And all of this is directly impacted on the same way that we think about building a best-in-class customer experience. Is it voice? Is it chat? Or nowadays, it's voice, chat, and visuals. And it's really about making sure that you can hit them no matter which one of these platforms is their preferred method, and no matter which one of these platforms they are looking at or caring about at that time. Because again, the key to conversation design is optionality. And for a lot of cases, that could be, for instance, the people or the huge influx of generational new bankers that only care about chat or going through a mobile app. And I guarantee you many of us have not been in a bank branch in a very, very long time, to even looking at how you prototype or where you want to meet or how you share things within your team. whether people are looking more and more towards just doing voice only, or even the way that we're reimagining what IVR expectations are, where it's less of a data tree and it's more of a user-based intent search. And it's also really just changing the way that we even organize and think about how the actual structure of our design is, moving further and further away from a branch system and more into nested intents and flows and things that are very driven based on natural ways that people speak. And a big thing to note about this as well is that while this is an evolving state and things are getting smarter, they are getting better, people choose voice because it's fast, but not always because it's perfect. And voice will always be one of the fastest ways that we can tell somebody or tell something what we want. But this is where we have to challenge ourselves as teams to understand, how do we deliver that output? How do we deliver this back and forth, not just forcing them into one single stream? Because I'm sure all of us have spent a lot of time over the last 2 years nestled in front of one of these smart TVs, looking at, for instance, this screen. We know this is a very big visual experience. You're literally trying to search and find and watch a movie. However, we've probably also hit this screen, where there could be something that you see directly on your screen already, and it is going to take you 17 clicks to get to that thing, plus this annoying, weird, not even QWERTY keyboard over here on the left-hand side. And it's always going to be faster for you just to say what you want. And this is a good example of optionality. How do you make this faster? How do you not interrupt or change the flow, but instead expedite it and give that power back to the user? And that's what brings us into the future, building this multimodal world. Voice, in this case, the fastest input to an endless amount of dynamic outputs. Whether it's you ordering an Uber, and for instance, in this case, it's always going to be faster for you to know where you want to go and say, hey, like, take me to, let's say, Project Voice X, versus going in, searching up where it is, typing in that. Instead, they could search that on Eventbrite, pull that, put that directly into, and now you can check your phone to see where your car is. Or in the same way, when we think about even extending beyond just micro actions, so contained within a platform, how do multiple platforms work amongst their APIs? So can you create, let's say, maybe you're on a little bit of a dating binge post-COVID, and you know you're gonna meet some people. Maybe you have a micro or a macro action of setting up a date. You know that macro is, hey, I'm buying some tickets, 2 tickets to, let's say, the sports event. They know from that ticket when and where that is happening. So Uber then schedules a ride for you for that time. And then OpenTable is like, hey, by the way, there are some bars that are available around that if you want to go early or if you want to go grab dinner after. And this is another example of even just thinking about, from a business perspective, expanded partnership opportunity. How do we really think about not just our experience as an isolated whole, but also how can it open up opportunities for us to work with other companies in the same juncture? See, when you really think about this and you're thinking about that future, it's not just about the isolated experience, it's about when and where it happens, and also how can you proactively guess what those things can be, or even create that, if that is something that is in the power of your company. And you're seeing companies already even trying to get ahead of that, whether it's Domino's, our favorite innovative pizza company, of always being one step ahead of now being able to order directly from your car, even send you SMS, send you the actual tracker, following up on Alexa, whatever it may be. All of these different ways are just more and more touch points that are memorable for the consumer and allow them to also see from a data perspective, which one is the most popular, which one should we invest more in. And lastly, you need to consider what external situations can impact your conversation design. Whether they're at home in their office, is it by their bed and it's late at night? Is it them on an outside isolated world or in a crowd, or is it a kid? All of these things can drastically change the way that we can design and also the way that we can make an impact within this. And this is very much so where things become both complicated and really, really exciting. So what can we learn from the past as we start to put this all together? So one thing that we always talk about at Voiceflow is that a platform shift happens once every few years. And you see that with, for instance, design tooling going from desktop to cloud and collaborative, aka the mass exodus of Adobe over to Figma, as well as another big thing that we look at is an interface shift, however, happens once in a career. And that's more so what we're in right now, where we've seen this in the past of people going from paper to web and first making the early mistakes of just shoving absolutely everything from the previous interface onto the new one, aka back when the web literally was a bunch of digitized brochures, to then them thinking about what is actually platform specific. What can I do here that I was never able to do before? And for instance, with web, that was the birth of instant messaging, of interconnectivity, of the actual digital villages that now many of us live in. And in the same way, when web went to mobile, it was very much so a big squished version of, of the web pages that you went to on a very, very tiny screen. And then people started to explore and start to build things later. However, what's really cool about this, and we're definitely experiencing this now, is despite each of these interfaces being different, the road to this innovation and adoption has been the same. People are creatures of habit, no matter what their circumstance. The early adopters come on, they then now adopt basic utility. So we've seen this with voice, people saying, what's the weather? What time is it? You know, the basic commands you would expect, to then people going incredibly hard on entertainment. Of how many people can go, you know, make that fun quiz game, make the let's say more game-based, more like, I would say like quick entertainment experiences that ultimately end up driving consumerization. So now you have more and more people to hit than you ever did before, but not necessarily the deep, impactful experiences that you might be looking for. And while this is a great way of getting more and more things into everybody's hands, this is where things get really exciting and what many people in this room are now focused on, which is that boom post-entertainment, where now everybody has these devices. It's how do we get them to a point of mastery, of how do we get them to custom utility? And examples of that are even back when you first got maybe your very first MacBook, and someone at the Apple Store was like, yes, you want Work OS because numbers and pages are going to be everything you ever use, and you just said yes. That is the example of just basic utility, because it was given to you. Now, you probably spend, let's say you start a new job, at least a day or 2 days customizing everything that is on that MacBook to be entirely dependent on you. And that's an example of just how far people have gone with adopting that technology, and we're very much so getting into that bracket with voice and multimodal expectations. And in this last bit, which is what's very exciting, is now we're starting to think about how can we push the boundaries and even test what are things that we were never able to do before now on these devices. And you even see that now with the way that people can almost replace things with their phone, or you have strong preferences. There's folders, there's things that are dependent, things that aren't just, let's say, a beer drinking app on your iPhone anymore, but instead a whole business built upon that. And us going from that platform specific to seamless multimodal, or even in the case where we think about, even as designers, even going further and planning backwards from an ecosystem design perspective, how do we go from building something that's wonderful just on that one platform to building something that extends that into an even greater, more memorable, stickier experience, to even beyond on how do we share that data build or get more cross information and create something that's a little bit more whole. And ultimately, that race and that collaboration is what's going to get us there. And on a closing note, as I kind of wrap things up, it's important for everyone in this room in particular to know that this change doesn't just happen. That the way that we think about our user behaviors today and how we're going to act on those is really going to change the way that we shape and reimagine them for tomorrow. And whatever situations won't be the same when we re-enter post this world, because we're still in that awkward, re-entering phase. Or even the way that we think about how our work has changed. All of these questions are relevant and things that we need to solve. Whether it's streamlining your work as teams, defining your standards for a new practice, or even how you work together in the way that we are going to be designing, we're going to be testing, we're going to be pushing the boundaries. So what will you build today that will help shape that progress of tomorrow? What will you build, and how can we help? So thanks everybody. If you guys have any questions, or even if you are looking for some really amazing people to join your team, we have a wicked jobs board that you can come in and you can post for free as well. That goes out to our community of conversation designers. And we have a great selection of templates, tutorials, different use cases that you can check out, even if you're a little bit curious to see what are some other use cases that you haven't yet played with. So thanks again, everyone. It was great to be here.